All right, welcome everybody. We appreciate you hopping on early to our tutoring session. We're going to save our anatomy announcements a little bit closer to when we're starting our tutoring, just in case anyone else hops on a little bit closer to that time. But for those of you that are joining us now, I'd like to really thank you for being here and welcome Jeff Rothberg from JoVE. We're incredibly thankful for JoVE's partnership this year in supplying some extra resources to all of you guys and also dedicating their weekend to coming in and talking you through how to use all of these awesome resources that they're providing for free. So thank you again, Jeff, for being here and for walking us through everything that JoVE has to offer for our anatomy participants.
My pleasure. I'm very happy to help out. So all I would like to do is take a few minutes and really take you through what JoVE is, what we're doing, give you an idea of how to navigate the resource and how you can find content that you might want to use for any type of research or content type stuff. I'm certainly happy to take time for questions if there's more that you would like me to show you. But that's basically it. Overview of JoVE, navigation, how to use the resource. Is there anything you all would like me to add to it?
I don't think so, Jeff, but I'm sure there'll
Okay.
be some questions.
Oh, questions are always fun. I love questions. And of course, my general rule when it comes to questions, if you have a question, you can save it to the end, but you're also welcome to ask me as I'm going along. And I say that because as a longtime middle school teacher myself, I'll never forget the days when I'd be in the middle of a lecture and I'd see a student raise their hand, and I'd say, "Can you give me 2 minutes to finish my thought?" And they'd put their hand down. And I kid you not, 2 minutes later, they have no idea what the question was they were going to ask. So my rule is always, if you have a question, go ahead and ask. Does that seem like a reasonable deal? All right. Okay, so let me share my screen and I will get into what JoVE does. So, the history of JoVE, just so you all know, is JoVE has been around for 15 years supporting higher education with their science resources and research articles and research videos to help out students in higher education. And over the last 2 years, JoVE has branched out into the high school and now the middle school market as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the JoVE platform that we have designed for high school and middle school. It's the same thing. So it's I don't have to show you both of them. Show you how to navigate the resource and give you a good feel for how it works. The good news is that most of the schools and teachers that I've been working with tell us all the time that they feel like the resource is very straightforward and very easy to use. Okay, so the first things first, getting a school set up with access. I have an arrangement with everyone in Anato-Bee, so as long as I know which school everyone is coming from, I can turn access on for the entire school and we can get things up and running. Once that access is turned on, all you'd have to do is go to the JoVE website, which is jove.com/schools, and hit the sign in button. And once you sign in, once the access is set up and everything's ready to go, you should be able just to create a new account from here using the school ID that's set up to the school system. Once that's set up and you're signed in, you'll wind up on a page that looks like this. And this is our wonderful Explore page we designed specifically for K-12. And then the thing teachers love about the Explore page and the thing students love about the Explore page is that everything is right at their fingertips, easy to find. Yes, I know. I'm a search bar person too. I love a good search bar. It is an AI generated search bar, so you can simply ask a question and you'll find what you want. However, there's more to it. Sometimes you might want to start off by looking for the subjects, and they're right here. Sometimes you might want to specifically look by state standards or NGSS standards, and we have all that built in. Maybe you want to go access some of your tools, like your playlists or something along those lines. The bottom line is everything is right here, easy to access at your fingertips. Now, I did allude a minute ago, what JoVE basically is, it's a video library. We have made thousands upon thousands of videos in-house across all sorts of science subjects. We have PhDs and all of our work is peer-reviewed to build these resources. So you can, of course, use the search bar and search for whatever you need. Just go ahead and type in whatever photosynthesis, how to dissect a frog, whatever you need. You'll find resources if you do a search that way. However, sometimes we're looking specifically by subject or by the standard. The nice thing is I will say this, and this is something a lot of educators will be like. If I'm searching specifically by standards, for example, let's say I'm looking at next generation science standards, which is what most states are using some version of. And if I'm looking for physical sciences, we've made it so easy on everyone. So if we're doing a standards-based approach, we have all of the physical science NGSS standards here. It gives you a description of what the standard is, And we've got a breakdown of the nav bar and everything to the point where if I wanted to look up a specific standard, if I know that this is the one standard I want, this energy standard, this is every single video JoVE has produced so far specific to these particular standards, and it's down to the individual strand as well. Very easy to find. And then of course you can change everything up here as well, if you would like to as well. I will go back to explore. Other times we might want to search by subject, and you can do that. I'll show you all the subjects, for example, in the view all section. These are our high school subjects. And again, we have our biology, chemistry, physics, and so on and so forth. And then of course we have our research videos as well. I'll get to those in a second. Now, I know everything's video based, so I always get the questions. So you're just watching things all the time? No, not always. Sometimes we are, but sometimes we're not. For K-12 and middle school and high school, we've prided ourselves on two specific video types. One is our concept videos, and they are short. And I mean short, a minute and a half long at best. It's perfect for the TikTok generation of kids. And I say that because I have a high school student myself who's always doing this thing. And they are so quick and to the point, and they're visual. It's a really great way to understand a concept, to reinforce a concept. And I'll click on one, for example, one of our concept videos, just so you can get a feel for the page. Scientific method, great place to start. And everything moves faster when you're not in a Zoom meeting. Have you noticed that? So if I'm on a video page, a lot of teachers have told me they feel like this is like YouTube. It looks like YouTube. It feels like YouTube. Yeah, it does. We designed it that way. The difference is that what we have here is peer-reviewed and aligned to standards, which we can't say about YouTube. But the video page itself is going to contain the video itself, which again, I won't play the video, but it is short. It's only a minute and a half long. I can change the language, the subtitles if I would like to. And then if I scroll down, I will find the synopsis, overview, observations, text-based stuff as well to go along with. So now I did say we're not only watching it because sometimes we have lab videos as well. And lab videos look specifically, mostly in our biology section. I see a lot of them in biology. Let me go back to high school and go to biology. If you can hear my 10-year-old screaming in the background, I apologize. I do have good noise canceling headphones. So we do have every so often for chemistry and biology, you will find lab videos, and sometimes you'll find them here, but you can also search for them as well. The lab videos are designed to be a little bit more interactive for the students. The goal of the lab videos are just to help the students really do the lab and replicate it effectively. JoVE was born out of the need for our CEO, who was a PhD student at Princeton many years ago, couldn't figure out how to replicate an experiment from the journal he was reading, flew to Vancouver to see the actual person do the experiment so he could actually visualize it and see what he's supposed to do. That's where he got the idea for doing videos, and we're still here today. Anyhow, so the lab videos have your concepts, which is again a concept. It also will contain instructor prep video. So for educators who want to actually do this experiment, it's going to have everything from a lesson idea to the materials list. But the protocol for the student is what I really like to focus in on, because the student protocol is the actual experiment step by step along the way. And it's designed for students to actually be able to do the experiment. I was not the best science student, so I would have been the student who literally has the laptop in front of me and I would be doing the experiment in real life, but I'm pausing the video as I go to make sure I'm doing things step by step so I'm not making any mistakes as I go. Okay, so those are two. In addition to the concept videos and lab videos, we also have the whole research section as well. So a lot of the research stuff comes from higher ed, so it might be very high level for some of our students, but it's going to contain the very high level type stuff. So if you have students who are operating at the super high level and want to pull research videos, they can. They will just wind up on this page with the research link, and you're going to see the journal videos and the encyclopedia videos. Here's the difference between the two. And of course, all the subjects it covers. Here's the difference. The journal videos are actual live videos that we shot with the people who wrote the paper, did the experiment. So they submitted their paper to us. We went with them, wrote a script, filmed them, doing the experiment, did the voiceover and everything. And then if I click on one of these, for example, I always like the mice one. The difference on this video page is not only do you have the video, which is going to be longer, this one's almost 8 minutes long, but it's going to contain the full text for the article that this author wrote, as well as the summary, a transcript of the whole video, and the citations for this article as well. So if you have students who need to cite these, we make it real easy. Y'all remember when we were younger, we had to figure out how to do the difference between MLA and APA siting? Like, all gone. Don't have to worry about that anymore. It's all right here, ready to go. Make it easy for everyone as well. Um, so this is the journal videos, and then of course we also have the Encyclopedia of Experiments, which is exactly how it sounds. It is a series of animated videos that we have designed to show common experiments that happen all the time, and they could be everything from biology to cancer research, and you can go specifically down into the collections as well. Okay, so I do have a few tips for students because sometimes we might have a series of videos we want to save. So I always recommend you can save videos as favorites, but you can also build playlists. And the playlist is exactly how it sounds. You're building a playlist of videos that you might need for X, Y, and Z, however it goes. There's two ways you can build a playlist. You can simply come to the playlist section and find JoVE collections, find playlists we've already built, or you can just come right here and create a new playlist and pull videos into it. Or you go the other way. I like to think that we're like smartphones where there's 6 different ways to do the same thing. You might have a playlist created. Like, for example, I have a few playlists already created on Inertia and Henry. I don't know who Henry is. A lot of us use this account. We might have these playlists already ready to go. And we're exploring. Like, maybe we're searching. Maybe we're searching on mitosis. I'll go to mitosis. I'll just use this one. Maybe we're searching on mitosis, for example. I've got this concept video. I think this is great. I want to use this. I want to save this in my playlist. Once I'm on the video page itself, I can, save the link, or maybe I'm in the videos. I'm here back in the concept videos, for example, and I'm on a page that looks like this on the scientific method page. I'll go back to scientific method. This is my favorite video. It's the basis of everything. And I see an add to playlist button. And from here, I can say, great, I just want to add it to that particular playlist I've already made, or I can create a new playlist from here as well. So we have favorites playlists, 20,000 different videos, multiple different video types between concept videos, lab videos, encyclopedia of experiments, journal videos that came with the full source and paper and the citing and everything like that. And as I said, most teachers tell us they feel like it's easy to navigate. The students seem to really enjoy it and they find it engaging because it's visual and we want to see it. And science is very abstract. At least it is to me. And that's what I hear from a lot of my students. It's very abstract. So that's my quick navigation overview, which I hope is replayable. What questions do you all have for me? Is there anything I missed that your students are going to need to see specifically?
Jeff, hi, it's Dana. Yes,
Hi,
so
Dana.
hello.
Good to see you again.
Yes, same. We had talked about for our classroom and earning some badges that
Mhm.
students would watch a series of 10 videos, taking screenshots along the way, but they also have to do the quizzes. So could you show them how to navigate to the quiz aspect of JoVE and maybe give them a sense of what that looks like?
Sure. Okay, so the nice thing about the quizzes is it's right here on the left side on the quizzes. You might have noticed when I was on the video page, there's also an add to quiz button if you wanted to create a quiz. But basically, the quiz page is going to look like this. We have a quiz library of pre-made quizzes as well, but you can also have your own quizzes that have been custom made, custom designed. If Anato-Bee wanted to make a series of quizzes, I could certainly work with you on that as well. Basically, once you're in a quiz and you're on a particular video, for example, I'll go to what are cells as an example. You would see a quiz that includes, oh, hold on. You're translating the quiz into something. Of course, every time I'm being recorded. Okay, so right here, I'm in the quiz itself. And so I'm not taking the quiz right now. This is the building of the quiz. Once it's built, I can send it out and create it, and students can access it that way. But basically, it still looks pretty much the same. We have our quiz. It's a video. Students can watch the video, and then they have their questions. And the questions are over here in this case. They'll be underneath in the actual quiz where they can answer the questions. I'm just in the section where I can edit it. Essentially, all the students would need is the link to the video. We can send it out to them. You can share the link to them. It's as simple as sharing this link, boom, and they'll be able to get to it. And basically all it is they watch the video and they answer the questions. We just have the ability to use either the pre-made quizzes that we already have, or you have the ability to custom design all of your quizzes. And some videos have 6 questions, some have 3 questions, but you could also have a quiz that has 5 videos and 20 questions, for example. So you can certainly custom design it however you need it to be. How was that, Dana? Did I answer your question there?
That's perfect, thank you. And I'll
You're
just say,
welcome.
recording then, so students, I'm gonna say that for the guidelines for the badge, you can access these quizzes and that would count. And or if you wanted, and they would be able to, right, Jeff, to create their own quizzes and they could share them on our Google Drive. Is that correct? Am I understanding that?
What I would recommend doing is there is a way to do it through Google Drive. As a technical question, I have to bring my tech guy in on it, but I do believe that what we could do is create a general quiz that would be if you want a general specific quiz that would appear here in our quiz library, and then that would be accessible to anyone, which is to make sure they have the students have the quiz link and you're good to go.
Yeah.
Right, and that would serve as a template and then they could customize it however many times that they wanted to. Is that correct?
So normally, uh, you normally quiz access is like educator level access as opposed
Got
to
it.
student level access. And yes, educators can tweak the quiz however they want. They can have their own quizzes in their library and then share it with the students from there.
Yeah.
Okay,
For the
great.
for the badge program to clarify on the recording, so what you guys will do as participants is participate in 10 of these quizzes and watch these videos, and then take a screen capture and upload that you've completed the quiz into the Google Classrooms. So that badge will become available sometime in the near future after we've shared this. And I'm not sure if we've really touched a lot on the badge program yet either. So maybe when we get to our introductions as well, Dr. Peterson, you can touch a little bit more on those as well.
And to further clarify, we want you to explore JoVE. So we aren't saying that you need to come in and just watch A&P videos. Watch whatever you're interested in. This is a great way to look at different types of STEM and to just look around. I will say when I worked in my lab, we submitted a video to JoVE. So it was pretty cool to kind of see this. And I'm like, oh, this is like the inner workings. So if you ever want to know about muscle excitation, stimulation when it's outside of the body, you can probably find it somewhere in here. But yeah, I
The
think
search bar,
in the search bar, Dr.
probably the search
Wanning's
bar.
lab. But yeah, so I think just again, a reminder, A&P, this is Anato-Bee is a competition about the anatomical sciences. We all know that. But we want you all to get interested in STEM, whether it is the anatomical sciences or medicine. If you like robotics, engineering, there's a lot of people who get into biomedical engineering. But if this is a great way to kind of explore that. So pick whatever you're interested in and do that, okay?
And then lastly, I'll just say again, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about this if we have a few minutes right before the start of the tutoring sessions. We also thought that this would be a great resource for all of our Anato-Bee participants by looking at and watching some of these science research, these laboratory videos, so that as you move forward, possibly going on to think about doing some research over the summer between grades in high school, between your graduation and your undergraduate education, or even as an undergraduate, to keep track of the different JoVE research laboratory videos you've watched and be able to explain to a potential, undergraduate principal investigator that has a lab, hey, I was really interested in this topic and I know a little bit about PCR or how to design primers. I think that would give you really a tremendous advantage over someone that hadn't had access to these videos and would have to be sort of taught by the laboratory personnel from sort of ground zero. So this could be a huge advantage for those of you that are thinking about, what's next for me after high school.
And I did find the one our lab did, and I posted it in the chat. So this is again, it's kind of really cool because it, like Jeff was saying, like I can say from experience, I'm not in the video, I'm not starred in the video, but our postdoc who did wonderful work in our lab is the one doing the procedure. So yeah, it just gives you an insight, like Dr. Peterson said, into what people do in a lab. And you can probably hear my children screaming too in the background, Jeff. So
Actually, I can't.
you can't? Oh, that's great.
I cannot.
Because I can. So yeah, so go ahead and look around and look
Explore.
into, I think that's a great idea, Dr. Peterson, look into different kinds of labs. We've had students come up to us, again, thinking about the different interactions we've had and the experiences. In previous years, I think last year, like Temple, a lot of students come up to me and say, do you know about neuroscience and neuroscience labs? And I have my network, but there's only so many people I know. So I think this is a great resource to kind of look around and see where things interest you. You can, like Dr. Peterson said, you can look at different kind of procedures that they do, but you might end up coming across something that you find so interesting. And these are actual labs submitting to JoVE. So you can look into which lab's submitting it, and then you can go ahead and look in the lab and see, do they take high school students? So there's many ways you can utilize this as a resource, and I know either one of us would be more than happy to allow you to pick our brains and help you figure out what's the best way to use it for you.
And of course, if you have questions for me about how just to navigate the resource, here's my contact information. You're all welcome to email me.
Did anybody else have questions for Jeff or about JoVE or about how to use the resources, where to find them? And Jeff, what do you think our timeline is for once we send you the list of schools where we have students participating? When will that access for them be available?
That is an excellent question. I'm going to say as soon as possible, just because there's a little logistical work on the inside on my side. So what I'm going to need to do is I would need two things. I would need obviously the schools that they're coming from. I would need their email domains as well. Yeah, that come from the school. And if there's a different email domain for students and teachers, I would need both. Um, I need to have our one team actually turn on the access for the schools. That will run through the whole period. But then I have to have the other tech team make sure the email domains are in the system and properly set up in the system. If both of those things are in place and you're not giving me a list of 1,000 schools, I would say it would take me a few days at most. Because I'm dependent on a few different teams to get things done. The more schools you give me, the longer it's going to take, obviously.
Right. And just so that you're aware, Jeff, and I think both Dr. Mapes and I mentioned this previously. So we have rolling registration. So students are able to register right up until about the middle of next year of January.
Right.
So, there may have to be some kind of, like you sort of intimated that we can set it up now. And then those students who've registered up to this point can access it. And then maybe 30 days after that, the team could go in and upload an additional set of new students that have registered. So is that, I don't want to put you on the spot, but maybe that's some logistics we could think about and work out.
It's the same process on our end. It's just adding another one to this list. My internal team might get annoyed with me, but that's my problem. I can worry about that. I'll take that heat for all your students.
Okay, and then I can tell you that I counted up earlier today. We have about right now 65 different high schools spread across the United States. So the number is not huge at this point.
Hey, it's more than we had last year.
I just want to thank you for your time and for being so gracious to come on, on a Sunday and right before a holiday. So again, really a heartfelt gratitude.
No, it's my pleasure. It's just, when it comes to helping out students and their passions, I might be doing this, but I'm still an educator at heart, and I always will be. So it's the least I could
We
do.
did have sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. We did have a couple of questions in the chat before you go, if
Okay.
that's okay. And yes, we do. Thank you so much. One person had asked if there's any way that they can search historical procedures, or is it just current medicine? And then we do have a question about sending emails in schools. So they had asked, are we going to have to send emails? Where would we send our emails in schools if our schools block external emails and resources?
Okay, so there's two questions.
Yeah.
So the first question is, I don't know. I don't know the history, like how far back it goes. I know we try to be current, but I also know that we haven't updated a lot of our older stuff in years. We're literally going back right now and updating a lot of the animations. Um, when it comes to schools and resources, I've been doing this a long time. I don't run into a lot of schools that block external emails and external resources. They might block a YouTube or a Chat GPT, but they'll block the big known ones. But if a school district has everything blocked, then it's just a question of talking to their tech person and making sure that JoVE is whitelisted, and then they can get through.
Yeah. So there's nothing that you as a participant need to do as far as sending us your information. When you registered, you provided us with your teacher's contact information. A lot of high schools, from what we've seen, is they'll block the student level emails to protect you. And then they will allow the educators a little bit more wiggle room in terms of what emails can be received from external. And then they'll let the teacher use the discretion of, filtering through what could be spam and things like that. So if there is any issue with contacting your teacher and it seems like you're not getting access to these resources, please contact us and let us know. And we'll be happy to make sure that that communication gets fixed between your institution and JoVE and the Anato-Bee. So at this time, I'll say that there's nothing that you as a participant need to do, and we'll just ensure that that information starts getting forwarded along to your institution. All right. Well, thank you again so much, Jeff. We'll keep an eye on the YouTube video when we upload this, and keep an eye on the comments that come in through there and that come into our email address again at info@anato-bee.org, and see if anything comes in there, and just ensure that we can help you guys use this resource and maximize its potential for you. So thank you so much again, Jeff, for hopping on today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the meeting, and I will go back to make sure my kids are fed because it's 6 o'clock here and they're probably hungry already.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a good rest of the day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining in for the JoVE session, or if you're just hopping on, thank you for coming on again to another Sunday evening. We really appreciate your time and again, dedication to anatomical sciences. This meeting is already being recorded right now, so there's nothing that you need to do differently, but just be aware that if you unmute yourself, then your voice will be heard, and if you keep your video on, then your likeness may be portrayed in our YouTube video. So if you'd like to remain anonymous, please keep yourself muted and your video off. And then if you're okay with having your likeness again portrayed online, then please, we welcome you to put your video camera on so that we can get to know you and see you. And we're looking forward to another great tutoring session. So as far as announcements go, we'll keep it brief. I don't know if Dr. Peterson was a big lead on our badges program, and while she's on, I was wondering if I could get her to just say a couple of things about that program that we've done since a number of our badges have become public in the Google Classroom.
Right, and I see a couple of individuals on the tutoring session as I'm looking at the participant list that have submitted different kinds of documentation for the certificates that you've been awarded over the last few years that Anato-Bee has been in existence. There's a badge program for starting an Anato-Bee club. And I did want to say, we thought we would have a lot of applications for those Anato-Bee clubs. And right now, currently, from what I saw earlier, we have 2 applications. So we would really like to make sure that all of you kind of understood what the advantage would be to starting an Anato-Bee club, what the guidelines are, and all of that can be found on the website. And Dr. Haggerty is also here, and she had a pretty pivotal role in helping to design, along with Dr. Piscura, those guidelines. So if you want to take a few minutes right now as a segue, and then I'll jump back on for some of the other badges, but I really would love for on the recording, more students to know about how they can start an Anato-Bee club.
Yeah, yeah. So these clubs should be you initiated as a student. This is your chance to be a leader at your institution and get things going to help create this opportunity for the peers around you that you know are interested also in the anatomical sciences or medicine or in science. And this is really a way for you to build the community of, the anatomy and just in STEM in general, within the institution that you're at. So we highly encourage this. This initiative was sort of brought about this year with this badge program because yourselves as participants had been independently starting to do this at your high schools over the last 2 years of our programming, which has been amazing for us to see. And so the formalization of this program through our badges is just our way to come alongside you and offer you a little bit more support in terms of how can you create a club, what are the restrictions, the guidelines. All of that can be found in our Google Classroom with the guidelines. There's also guidelines found in our website underneath the forms and resources. But really, all you need to do to get started is just identify that you yourself would love to have some classmates learning anatomy with you and do some really cool things together to make that job easier. And so all you need to do from that point on is basically find a mentor that's willing to advise your group. And that doesn't have to be a teacher. If you're here and you're homeschooled, that could be a parent, that could be a community leader, that could be someone as from your church or mosque or wherever your religious affiliation is. Anywhere where you identify someone that could be a mentor to you in this way and will take responsibility for you to help make sure that you're following the guidelines. So I won't go too much into detail just for the sake of time in terms of what all of our all the club guidelines are specifically, but that's all you need to get started. And we are just here with Anato-Bee to help you do that. And I just want to do a shout out and thank you to our students that have already started to do that and just begin that process with us and recognize that that was a need. So really thank you to all of our Rockstar students that have done that in the past.
Yeah, I will just piggyback off of that, and Lunas will go to your question. But someone had asked in the chat if the how-to session with Joe was going to be recorded on YouTube. Yes, we've been recording the whole time, so that will be included on the YouTube video. And just to piggyback off of what Dr. Piscura was saying, this really came about because students would come to us and say, how can I get more involved with anatomy? And this is how. So you can create a student group, and we encourage you to get together. We do want you also to have a leader of that group because we do want someone to hold the onus of the group to keep meeting. And the whole part of this is to help you get through the resources and prepare for the competition. So let us know if there's any way we can help. Again, like Dr. Piscura said, everything you need to know about creating a group is on the classroom, Google Classroom. Lunas, what was your question?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I had a question
No
regarding
worries.
the WISE-B badge. Um, Regarding last year's regional competition, I believe all we received were our competitor medals. But the WISE-B asks for a certificate from the previous 2 years, but we only have the recommendation letter from Thomas Jefferson from the first year, and then the medal received from both the first year and the second year.
Yeah, so the local competition from each one, you will have received a certificate of completion for the local. So for the regional, there's nothing you need to do as far as advancing there, and it could be anybody that had just made it through the local competition and has their certificate of completion through the local competition to upload those. You will notice that there is a third and a fourth year. We're only starting our third year now, so that's just to acknowledge the fact that we will eventually come to a point where there will be a third and fourth year, but at this point, we should only really have people up until the second year. So, and this would now have been your third year, this time around. So if you're eligible next year, then you'd upload all three of those as evidence of your 3 years of participation for the WISE-B.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Lunas, if you have trouble finding those resources, or if anybody does, Lunas, I know you have my information. So you can feel free to email me. I can vouch for them that they were at both competitions. Uh, but if anybody else has trouble locating those resources, or for whatever reason you didn't receive them, please email us, because we would like to know.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And maybe just, Dr. Frank, before we start introductions of our new tutors for this evening, just a real quick announcement about in the Google Classroom, one of the badges that you can work on is actually a series of 10 modules designed by the Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia. And it really will give you and your classmates, if you choose to do this through the club, or if you choose to do it with just a group of your friends that are studying for the anatomy, about the social determinants of health. And it's very well done. And I think many of you would already have an interest in this, and this could just help you become a little bit more informed about what those social determinants of health are and what people around the United States, how they're working on resolving some of those issues. So that's all I had, Dr. Pascura.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying badges. I'm really excited for you guys to jump on board with those. And just again, to sum that up, email us if you have any questions. But all the descriptors should be in the Google Classroom and ready for you to tackle them. So with that, we'll start our third tutoring session. That's MSK all day. And really excited to have our moderator, Dr. Frank, again, help us introduce our participants and navigate all your questions throughout the next 2 hours.
All right. Lots of good information. Wow. Wow. Okay. Well, once again, I'll be your humble moderator for tonight's session. And as Dr. Pascura said, it is MSK all day or all evening, at least for the next 2 hours. And our first topic is going to be anatomy, muscular anatomy. And our first presenter is Kenzie Stoup from the Edward Via College of Osteopathic Medicine. So Kenzie is from Montgomery, Alabama. She graduated from the University of West Georgia in 2023 with a BS in chemistry and a minor in biology while playing soccer. She is currently a second-year medical student and has an interest in OB-GYN. In her free time, she likes to play piano, play soccer, and run. Her favorite sections of anatomy are MSK and abdominal GI. So with that, Kenzie, it is all yours.
Hi, I'm really excited to be doing this with you guys. I'm also very excited that I got the MSK stuff because it's my favorite. Just to kind of start, why it's my favorite, I think it's great because it's very visual and tactile. You can use your own body to study, and I think that helped me out so much when I was learning. So I'm excited to start. I'm gonna, let's see, screen share here. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Sorry. Try to get this expanded. Can you guys see that? Okay. Is it full screen?
It's not in presentation mode. I think if you hit
Okay.
slideshow.
There we go. Okay, so these are just the learning objectives kind of for this lecture, and then the link to last year's video if you want to go ahead and watch that. And we can just get started with the first question.
I think I'm still seeing the, oh, there we go. Now it's all loaded in. All right.
Okay. So for the first question, it says, during a soccer game, a player is extending her leg to kick a ball towards the goal. While multiple different muscles are involved in this motion, which muscle of the thigh will act as the major antagonist of this motion? If someone wants to also start a poll, I'm not sure how to do that.
We've got you. Dr. Frank's loading it up for us now.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Give it a few more seconds here.
Okay.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
All right. And let's see, choice one. Seems like it won here. Let's see. And answer choice C is going to be correct. It says in the question that she is extending her leg. So the primary mover of that is going to be your rectus femoris. And then the question is asking which muscle would be antagonizing that motion or kind of the opposite. And that is going to be your biceps femoris here, also kind of your hamstring. So here's your quad, and that would be extended in this motion. And then the hamstring back here would be the antagonist. So just a little overview of what a mover, an antagonist, and a synergist are. If we look at this example down here in the right-hand corner, you have a person like picking up a glass of water, and the major mover in that would be the biceps as you flex your elbow. And then the antagonist of a certain motion is going to be the muscle that is going to do the opposite. So in this example, the major movement is flexion, which is your biceps, and the antagonist would be the triceps, because that's the opposite motion, which does extension. And then a synergist here is just something that is stabilizing and helping out that major movement. So in this example, the flexion is the major movement. So a synergist would be either brachioradialis here or possibly brachialis. And then also just a note that a muscle that crosses a joint will act on that joint. So in our example here with the biceps lifting up that glass of milk, the biceps crosses the elbow joint. So the major movement is there. And then also it has a little bit of action at the shoulder because it attaches at the shoulder as well. And then just a little bit about like the actions of the muscles. The motions of the elbow, the main motions are flexion, which is decreasing the angle. So the angle between your forearm and your upper arm is going to decrease, and extension is making that angle larger. And then supination and pronation. Supination is having your palms up, like holding a bowl of soup, and then pronation is having your palms down. Same with the shoulder. Flexion and extension is flexion is shortening the angle and extension is extending it. With abduction, adduction, those can be easily confused. I think of abduction like being abducted, it's taking away from your shoulder. And then adduction is adding it back to the body. So adduction, adding it back to the middle. And then internal and external rotation is usually with your arm up. You can see that the upper arm internal rotation will point towards you and an external rotation will point away from you. So just getting those down as you're going through questions can help you eliminate certain muscles they're asking for. And then here for question 2, it says the biceps brachii and the triceps brachii lie in the anterior and posterior fascial compartments of the arm respectively. And based on those fascial compartment, and based on the fascial compartment in which the brachialis resides, which of the following statements would be true?
Give a few more seconds here. 3, 2, 1.
Okay, choice 1 had the most, and choice number 3. So let's see. And answer choice A is going to be correct. So this question is trying to help you differentiate between what muscles lie in the different compartments. So if we take a look up here at this upper hand corner, this is a cross section of your upper arm. So it's like if you were to cut your arm here and you look up at it, that's kind of what we're looking at here. And this is how the upper arm is divided into different fascial compartments. You can see the humerus here, and this blue line is dividing the arm into the anterior compartment here at the top and the posterior compartment. And then in the anterior compartment, you have your biceps and your brachialis, and your posterior, you have your triceps. And so this is how we can view the arm. And in each compartment, they have specific functions. So your flexion is with your anterior and your extension is the posterior. And so as we talk about fascial compartments, it's the way to divide the muscles into their functions. And then also each muscle in that compartment is going to be supplied by similar blood supply and nerve supply because they're functioning the same. And I think fascia is something that's kind of hard to wrap your mind around because it seems a little bit abstract, but it's just a type of connective tissue that bundles your muscles together with the neurovasculature so that they can function, and it has structural support and kind of provides a compartment or a home for that muscle to reside. And it can reduce some of the friction as all of your flexors are flexing together. You want to keep them together, and your extensors, you want to keep them separated. So we can see here, this slide is good to just help break down the blood supply and the innervation of each of the compartments. It's good to reference back and use to quiz yourself. When I was first learning this last year in medical school, I found it helpful to start big and work my way in. So start big as in what compartment am I in, and think of your anatomical positioning. You know, you have anterior and posterior, medial and lateral. So find the anterior compartment of my arm and think, okay, I'm touching my anterior compartment. What muscle lives in here? And that's the biceps muscle. And then you can say, okay, what muscle lives in the posterior compartment? That's my triceps. And you can keep your hand on the anterior compartment and move it until you feel that muscle contract. And when it's your biceps, you can, when you flex your arm, you can feel it contracting. And that way it just kind of provides a way for you to think through each compartment rather than having to memorize lists of muscles. And then as you work through that, you can add in the details later of which arteries and nerves reside in each compartment. And I think that's just a helpful way that when you approach a question, it's not just memorization, but a way for you to really work through and understand what's going on in each compartment. And then this bottom chart here is just similar for the thigh. And then as we move on for question number 3, it says, muscles in the posterior fascial compartment of the upper arm perform what primary function?
And to end the poll in 3, 2, 1.
All right, choice 2. Good job. So extension of the forearm at the elbow joint is what that posterior compartment is going to do. You can see here in this GIF or GIF, I don't know how to say it. You can see that the tricep here, as that arm is moving down, it's being contracted. And that's going to be the major mover of the posterior compartment and of elbow extension. I think something that can be a little bit confusing is it says here extension of the arm at the shoulder joint. The triceps more act kind of as a helper to some of the shoulder muscles to do that, but its major movement is going to be at that elbow joint in the extension. And then here's just kind of breaking down in a different way each of the different functions of the compartments of the forearm and the upper arm. I kind of want to take a look here at some of these little GIFs. You can see that as the biceps flex, the arm is being brought up closer, and that's on the anterior arm. I think that the forearm can be a little bit more confusing, but if you're in anatomical position, remember that your palms are out. So the anterior would be, you know, up front with your palm facing out, and that's going to do the flexion of your wrist and your fingers. And then the posterior compartment is going to do the extension of your wrist and your fingers. One other thing that I want to point out here in the posterior compartment, I think this is really helpful for memorizing all the innervation, is that your radial nerve does the posterior compartment all the way down from your shoulder to your wrist and your fingers, which is really helpful for memorizing. So you can just remember anything extension in the upper arm or in the forearm is going to be all radial nerve. So that's just one little tidbit as you're learning to differentiate what's going on in each compartment so that you can kind of reduce the amount of memorization that you're having to do. And then question number 4 here says
Kenzie,
that
Kenzie,
yes.
can there's a question about compartments. So Rashab said, I noticed the fascial compartments for the arm are separated into 2, but cross-section shows more than 2 compartments. So what is the basic definition for a fascial compartment?
Let's see. Is it talking about this here?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay. I think mostly the fascial compartments here, the anterior and posterior, this is for the upper arm specifically. And here you see kind of a divider right here. I don't know if this is the point of confusion, but you have 2 different muscles here. So the fascia is dividing the muscles themselves separately, but this compartment is defined by all of these muscles in this anterior compartment are performing the same function of flexing at the elbow joint. And then you can see this divider is talking about the brachialis is here, and then the biceps brachii is here. So the fascia can divide muscles individually, but also muscles by their function, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's just the just as you had said, Kenzie, to add on to that, there's that deep fascia that is covering over the individual muscles. As we get into the histology of the muscle, I think that fascia will make a little bit more sense as we're talking about how there's actually layers of connective tissue around even the parts that are making up that muscle. And it kind of gets thicker with connective tissue as you go further along. So there's a thinner layer that's going to be surrounding bundles of muscle fibers. And then you can see that there's a distinct layer that you can see without a microscope covering the entire muscle. And then you'll notice that within the compartment, there's another layer of that deep fascia that surrounds it. And not what you need to know for the competition, but as you expand in your knowledge of anatomical sciences, you come to know that there's a medial and a lateral intermuscular septum. And so that's just a thicker layer, even thicker layer of connective tissue that you can see where a lot of that neurovasculature is running through. And that connective tissue is providing support for those structures, and then additionally also separating them into the compartments that they're found in. So really good answer, Kenzie, and really good thing for you to have picked up on already for MSK. So good question.
That's a great question. Yeah, I think fascia can be a little bit hard to understand at times, but it's really just dividing by function. I think it's just providing a lot of support for the muscles. Is the best way to look at it. And then let's see, I think we were here. Yeah. So we have a 32-year-old runner who is arriving to the sports med clinic after twisting his leg during training. When you're examining him, you notice that he is unable to plantar flex at his ankle when attempting to push off the ground while walking. Which of the following muscles is most likely injured? And then you can go ahead and do a poll for that. And if you guys want to just answer this bonus question in the chat, you can do that too.
We're going to close this in 3, 2, 1.
All right. So the major mover of this is going to be the gastroc, which is like what you guys would consider your calf muscle. And that muscle primarily is in plantar flexion or pushing on the gas pedal. So pushing your toes down into the floor. And then the antagonist to that movement down here is the tibialis anterior, which is going to be on the front of your leg. And that is involved in lifting your toes up to the sky. So we can get a picture here. I like this image down on the bottom showing the difference between plantar and dorsiflexion. I used to get those confused a lot. So I think plantar, push, gas pedal, because they both start with the P. And then you can see here that the lower leg is actually divided into 3 different fascial compartments. And here you can see this is your anterior compartment with your tibialis muscle, and that muscle is what is doing your dorsiflexion or raising your toes up to the sky. And then in this back image, you have the gastroc. It's cut in this image, but it would extend all the way down, and that does your plantar flexion. And then you also have a third compartment here, which is your lateral compartment with the fibularis longus here. And remember that lateral versus medial, lateral is further away from midline and medial is towards midline. And then you can see here, same with your biceps, how you can feel the bicep contracting. If you point your toes into the ground and push really hard, you can feel that your calf muscle is contracting. And same with the other compartments. If you figure out what compartment you're in and then do whatever motion you can feel the contraction in that muscle, that will figure out your muscle and your compartment without having to necessarily memorize too much. And you can fill in the final details with just understanding this innervation and arteries here. And I think that's kind of a good way to approach it. I will say with the lower leg, it can be a little bit more difficult because in the other compartments, the artery and nerve names are very similar. You can see here that in the fascial compartments here, the names are a little bit different. So as you're studying, just pay attention to that and see that these names aren't lining up very well. But you can also see here that the foot has inversion and eversion. It's sort of similar to supination and pronation of the forearms like this. So inversion, I think you're pointing your big toe in towards your midline, and eversion, you're trying to push your big toe away underneath. So inversion and eversion. Those can be kind of tricky to figure out and get the hang of. So I would spend some time understanding the ankle movements. And then last question here, it says, which nerve is primarily responsible for innervating the muscles in the anterior compartment of the forearm that flex the wrist and the fingers?
I'm going to close in 3, 2, 1.
Great. So it seems here that choice 1 was chosen the most, so we can kind of talk about the difference here, because choice B is correct, the median nerve. Remember, in anatomical position, your palms are out, so your anterior compartment is, you find it with your palms facing out. And then if you feel your anterior compartment on your forearm and you flex your wrist like this and your fingers, you can feel those muscles contracting. And remember, I told you earlier that every single thing in the posterior compartment of the arm is done by the radial nerve. So everything extension of your triceps, extension of your forearm is all going to be the radial nerve. So when you see a question like that, you can eliminate, if it says flex, you can immediately eliminate the radial nerve because that's the #1 nerve that does your extension here. The forearm is actually pretty intricate anatomy here. You can see there's lots of muscles. And every single muscle in the anterior compartment of the forearm is going to be done by the median nerve, except for only 2 muscles. So that's how you can kind of remember this. Here's that know that every single thing in the anterior is done by median nerve, except for 2 muscles, and they do they're going to do the flexion of your 4th and your 5th finger out here. So if it's anything with these 3 fingers, it's going to be median nerve. this picture here is just kind of like a classic exam question where a patient will get an injury to their median nerve and they can only flex the fourth and the fifth finger. So their hand will be stuck like this. And so they'll come into the office complaining that they can't move these first three fingers. And then here on the posterior compartment, again, it's done by the radial nerve. This is a really classic exam question as well. If you get an injury to the radial nerve over here, if you see in this bottom right-hand corner, since it does extension, if the radial nerve is injured, you can't extend your wrist. So you're stuck in flexion like this. And it's called a wrist drop, and they can't lift the wrist up. And also, depending on how high that nerve injury is, you could also get an injury where your bicep is stuck because you can't extend at the tricep. So that has come up a couple times, I know, on our exams here at VCOM, but it's a really great clinical application to understand that if you get an injury to this nerve, what function is going to be inhibited, if that makes sense. And that is all I have for you guys. If you guys have any questions for me.
Oh, yes. We'll start with the first one. Do the muscles on the posterior compartment, are they always associated with extension movement, or can it vary?
In the upper arm here, in the arm, yes, let's look at this. So here you can see this is extension of the elbow, and here you can see this is extension of the forearm. But actually in the leg, it's a little bit different. So with your hamstrings, that's considered the posterior compartment. That is going to be flexion just based on the anatomy of the way your knee is oriented. But that's why it's helpful to kind of feel that muscle. So if you feel your hamstring and you flex your hamstring, your knee is moving in and doing flexion there, versus on your upper arm, if you flex your tricep, your elbow is extending and making a bigger angle. So I would say for the most part, you can think of it doing extension, but the hamstring is kind of the outlier in that situation.
And another thing I'll throw into there is just thinking about what flexion versus extension is. So just as Kenzie had said before, anytime you're flexing a joint, that's going back into the fetal position. That's bringing you back and crawling back into yourself essentially and making those joints, the angle smaller. So I'm decreasing the angle. If I bring my wrist in, that's going to be flexion. Extension increases, that's like 45-degree angle. That's 180 degrees, for example. So for the leg, if I'm flexing my leg, then my knee's going backwards. And that will go into, when we're talking about skeletal development and how our lower limbs are rotating. But because they bend the other direction, then you'll find that the flexors are found in the posterior compartment of the thigh for the ones that are going to be helping for flexion at the leg. But based on their attachment, those ones are going to extend the hip. So I would focus more so on kind of just drawing an imaginary line of where the muscles are. Think about if it was a string that was getting tighter and where that's going to draw the leg towards. That's where I think the origins and insertions are really helpful at your stage of learning, is they're just going to explain what movement can happen based on where they're attaching. And so I don't think, unfortunately, you can't do a generalized way to do that. As far as posterior is always this, but you can work through it and logic your way around it to have that explain it for you. So really good question. And I'm really glad you asked that so that we can have that conversation. And thank you, Kenzie, for a really good explanation.
Yeah. And just Kacie probably will expound upon that a little bit in the embryology section later on this evening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, another question. Is there a way to better memorize muscle compartments?
I think that this is from my own learning experience, kind of working through this as I was learning it last year for the first time. I have a really hard time just memorizing things, so I try to be able to work my way through things as best as possible. So for the compartments, as long as you know your anatomical position, that's why I really like MSK so much, is because you can feel what's going on. And I keep using the bicep as an example because you can probably hopefully see it in the screen. But if you find that compartment first and then move your arm, then, or your leg or wherever, you can feel what is contracting there. And you can also see the motion with your own eyes, what's going on. And I think that eliminates a lot of the memorization aspect of it. what you will have to memorize is what muscles lie in each compartment. And that would be kind of my approach, is start really big and learn where the compartments are and learn the functions of the compartments. And you can start adding in details as you go of what muscle lies there and such, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think charts like this are incredibly helpful. Yeah, I remember that's how I learned it the first time, was sort of these summary slides. And then, just as Kenzie had said, work through it, use your body. You have a cheat sheet walking around with you at any given time. We always tell the medical students when they're taking a practical exam, put your hand on your body and use it. Of course, you've got this whole guide to tell you. So I highly recommend, just as she said, work through these charts and feel them on your own body and do the motions and feel when the muscle gets tight and how that makes sense. And if I'm flexing and I'm feeling my anterior arm, feel that biceps bulk up. And just think about times where you use those muscles then. And I think those real applications help the rest fall into place.
Also, what is a basic definition of a compartment?
I'm not 100% sure of like an exact definition. I think that kind of the generalized definition is where the fascia is lying and what functions are being performed. So the muscles are separated by their function into those compartments. I don't know if Dr. Pasquira has a better explanation for that.
That's exactly it. It's just the fascia that is encompassing these structures. They develop with us very early on, and we begin to form this network. We've all had this for a long time. So I think for the compartments, one really good way to think about it is by bringing in a clinical correlate. Some of you might have heard of compartment syndrome before. So as all these structures are developing, again, connective tissue is developing around each of these structures, really helping to provide a lot of the supportive structures and providing a route for the neurovasculature. And when I say neurovasculature, I mean the nerves, the arteries, and the veins to supply those structures. And when they're doing that, again, they just form this capsule. And that's a really good thing because, again, we said we want them to have that support and that structure. As Kenzie had mentioned, they're helping with friction. Where that becomes a con or a bad thing is when, for example, let's say you have a lot of inflammation or an infection in one compartment, it's going to build up and you're going to have a lot of fluid, going to this area, and a lot of cells come to this area to help take care of that. And you're going to end up with a lot more stuff in that compartment than you want, essentially. That puts a lot of pressure on that compartment. And if it has nowhere to go, you can compromise the blood supply. Imagine if you put like a lot of tension on an artery because it's in that compartment, then you're not able to adequately continue to perfuse those structures. So compartment syndrome is a really common thing in the lower limb and is considered an emergency, but it's a really good example of how these compartments work. And so that might be something that you look into to get kind of an example of what that might look like. And so the solution for that I'll tell you, again, none of this is something you need to know for the competition, but just in the sake of better understanding the connective tissue, is that what's one way that you could, fix that issue. If there's a ton of pressure in a system, you just make a release. And so the fix for that surgically is to open the fascia and make an incision through the fascia so that there's more room, essentially. So those are things that can get kind of graphic. If you guys are looking up images of those, I'll forewarn you on that. But just know that compartments are there really to help you providing this structure. But again, they can cause that issue too by keeping the space only limited to that amount.
I just wanted to say Angel had a good point that compartment, typically the muscles in a compartment are going to have a lot of times a similar action, but the biggest thing is they usually will have the same innervation. And so that's one of the defining things as well. Obviously the compartment itself and what is contained, but innervation is a key as well. Why are there two nerves that operate in the muscles of the upper arm, musculocutaneous and radial? Is innervation analogous with similar blood supply and similar functioning muscles?
Yeah, so like we said here, oh, you said in the upper arm. So musculocutaneous is doing your anterior compartment, and those all have the same function. And same with the artery here. Your brachial artery is supplying all of this anterior compartment as well. And the way your nerves come out of your spine and then they branch and go everywhere. And so they go to exactly the areas that they need to innervate. And that's why this fascia is also really important, because it separates these compartments so that this, musculocutaneous nerve can just do the anterior and this radial nerve can just do the posterior. So the different innervation is for the different functions. And kind of like how he said, kind of a defining feature of these compartments is that all of them are going to have the respective compartment are going to have similar innervation. So each nerve is supplying a different function, whether it's in the thigh or the upper arm or wherever.
Yeah, and we'll cover more of this information about how nerves are working once we get to nervous system, and that'll make a little bit more sense. But for today, I'll just let you know that for these nerves, all we're doing is sending an electrical signal to say, activate this thing to happen. And that's just going to create a contraction in the muscle. So if the same nerve supplied both compartments, then when that nerve was propagating that signal along, it would be trying to do two things at once. And so your arm, instead of firing and saying, hey, contract just the anterior portion of your arm, when I'm doing that, the radial nerve is relaxing. We're not sending a signal to contract this. That's what's allowing me, is that those two compartments are always working together. So if there was just one nerve doing all of it, my arm wouldn't move at all, because it would be telling both to contract at the same time, and it would just be trying to fight between the two of them, and it really wouldn't want to go anywhere. So that's another way to think about it. But I love these questions that you guys are asking, because they're really hitting that you guys are getting these foundational concepts. So I see that there is a question about smooth muscle and skeletal muscle. So I think this is the perfect segue to just jump over to histology.
I'm sharing this.
Thank you so
Excellent.
much, Kenzie. That was
Thank-
really awesome.
Thank
We
you guys. I
appreciate you.
enjoyed it.
And excellent questions, everyone. Really appreciate the input. So, Kenzie, thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
that's going to be a hard act to follow, but we have Taylor Leistiko from Pacific Northwest University College of Osteopathic Medicine. So Taylor is going to be talking about the histology of muscle tissue. Taylor, for background, is from Missoula, Montana, and graduated from Carroll College with a bachelor's in biology and a minor in chemistry. She worked as an EMT and volunteered with a local fire department during her gap years. She is currently in her second year at Pacific Northwest University. Her primary interest is in the field of emergency medicine. When not studying, she is out camping, hiking, fly fishing, or hanging out at the lake paddleboarding with her dog, Izzy. So, Taylor, if you would share your screen, and it is all yours.
Hello.
And I'll be happy to run your polls.
Okay, can you guys see it? Okay. All right, so we're gonna do the histology of muscle tissue for the next little bit. Oh, and then here's the link for the all these questions are based off of the lecture that's on the YouTube channel. And then there's a link where you can find that at the end of this presentation. Okay, so here's all your guys' learning objectives, and then there's that link. We're just going to go through the 3 different types of muscle tissue. So we'll just get started. So we can do a poll for this one. Which of the following correctly describes skeletal muscle tissue?
3, 2, 1.
Nice. Looks like most people got that the right answer is A. There it is right there. So yeah, skeletal muscle is going to be striated. Here's a nice picture of it. So you can see some pretty clear striations. It's if you zoom in, they're a little bit easier, but it's nice and striated, multinucleated, and then your skeletal muscle's under voluntary control. And then I have a follow-up question. So which, you can just type in the chat for this one. What is option B describing and what is option C describing? Okay, we'll go ahead and go to the answers. So it looks like you guys are all getting it. B is going to be smooth muscle. C is going to be the cardiac muscle. So then here's pictures of that. This one's the cardiac muscle over here on the left. And then this one's going to be the smooth muscle. So you can see the differences with the pictures right there. And then you're going to want to remember that the smooth muscle doesn't have any striations and the cardiac muscle does. And then the difference between the smooth and, or the similarity is that smooth and cardiac muscle both are under involuntary control. So like you can't tell yourself when to like beat your heart. So it's like involuntary. Your skeletal muscle, you can like control, like I want to flex my arm. So that's kind of what that's explaining. And then the cardiac muscle is like single nucleus or at most two that are centrally located. And then the smooth muscle is also just single nucleus compared to the skeletal, which is multinucleated. Okay, next question. Oh, and this is just a good like review chart for you guys that just goes through and breaks it down by nuclei, the shape, the striations, and then the involuntary or voluntary control. It's just like a good summary of everything. Okay, next question. Where can you find smooth muscle tissue? A, in the heart, B, biceps and triceps, C, stomach, intestines, and blood vessels, or D, the quadriceps muscles.
End in 3, 2, 1.
Perfect. 94% got that it's C, and that is the correct answer. So yeah, you're gonna have a smooth muscle in anything in the GI tract, which is stomach and intestines, and then also the urinary tract, reproductive tract, and in your blood vessels too. And then just for review, your cardiac smooth muscles in your heart. So that's kind of nice. It's easy to remember because cardiac means heart. And then biceps, triceps, and your quadriceps are all skeletal muscles. Okay, here's the next question. Sarcomeres have thin and thick filaments. What type of protein filament are they each composed of? Are they both myosin, both actin, thin is actin and thick's myosin, or thinner myosin and the thicker actin?
Three, two, one.
Yep, good job. You guys are doing really good today. Majority got that it's C. So your thin ones are going to be made out of actin and your thick ones are going to be myosin. So kind of how I remember this is if you guys know myo, the MYO, uh, it it's kind of like Greek or Latin for muscle. And so like if you think about muscle, it just seems like big, strong. So like thick makes sense for me. And then thin, actin, the ending just tin just seems for some reason my brain is just like, oh, it makes sense that it's small. So that's how, yeah, like thin, tin, I don't know, just works. And then here's a good picture of that too. So you can see the green is like much smaller looking. That's the thin and that's the actin. And then the purple is the thicker ones, and those are all myosin. And then this slide also has in the sarcomere, they use like the sliding filament model when the muscle is contracting. So it's like essentially these myosin heads like pull the actin over it. And that's what helps the muscle contract. And there's some good like YouTube videos on the cross bridge cycle. I'm not sure how much you guys have to know for that. But I think like the animation is nice because you get the visual of it like grabbing the actin and pulling it.
We won't ask you any specifics on the physiology, beyond anything that you're presenting in here. But for those of you that really like to know how things work, I can guarantee you that if you move forward and experience this in undergraduate level, then you would have to know that. But for the sake of the competition, then everything that you're presenting today, Taylor, is perfect.
Okay. Okay, next question. So what part of the sarcomere has overlapping of both the thick, so the myosin, and the thin, the actin? Is it going to be the A band, the I band, the H band, the M line, or the Z line?
And the poll in three, two, one.
All right, so this one was definitely a little trickier. Looks like the answers are kind of split. Uh, so here, so the answer is the A band. So then this slide is pretty good at going over all the different parts on the sarcomere. So that A band, you can see right here in this diagram, is going to have the overlapping of the thick and thins. So like I said, like those thick filaments are going to pull the thin, like it essentially grabs onto it and pulls it over. And so the A band is going to be the overlap of both. The H band is gonna just be the thick filaments, and then the I band is gonna be only thin filaments. So this is I band, just the thin, H band, just the thick, and then this A band is gonna be an overlapping of both of them. And then just for review, the M line is kind of right here in this diagram. And then the Z line is also called like the Z disc, and that's where the thin filaments attach on. And so like a whole sarcomere is defined as like Z disc to Z disc, and that's like its length. Does that make sense to everyone? Do you have any more questions about that?
For the recording, Taylor, would you just walk through and show a little bit, maybe using your fingers? I've seen some people do that to show kind of what we mean by the overlap from that question.
Yeah, sure. So like if you kind of think about it's kind of sitting there like this. It's kind of lined up at baseline like this, and then when the muscle contracts, these slide, and see how my fingers are like overlapping? So it's like this, and then when the myosin pulls it, they go like that and overlap. So I hope that helps. And then I have another picture later that might help with that too. See. Let's do this question first, and then I'll show you guys the other picture I have. So what part of the sarcomere does not shorten during contraction? This one is also a little tricky.
Ending in 3, 2, 1.
All right. Yeah, this one's kind of hard too. The answer is actually A again for the A band. So I know the last one was also A band, so that might have tricked you guys a little bit. But yeah, the A band does not shorten during contraction, which seems a little confusing. But if we look at this picture, I hope this helps. So this is what it looks like relaxed. So that's kind of like your fingers not touching it at all. And then when it contracts, it goes like this. So these ends are all shortening and getting closer, but your A band actually stays the same the entire time. So like those filaments are overlapping and like more of it's getting overlapped, but the actual like length of it doesn't change. That's kind of a weird concept, but um yeah, I really like it took me a while. I had to kind of just stare at the picture before I was like, okay, I understand now.
We have a good question. Is actin and myosin in all muscles regardless of the type?
Um, I know it's definitely in skeletal muscle. I don't think it's in smooth muscle, and then cardiac muscle, there might be some in cardiac muscle. I just mostly know it in the context of skeletal muscle because that's the classic like sarcomere sliding filament model that they use. But cardiac muscle has striations, so I think it also has some sarcomeres, but they just don't really focus on it as much.
So there still will be those same core proteins, but the organization will be different. And there will be additionally some other proteins that are going to be found in skeletal versus smooth muscle that helps them operate and contract a little bit differently. Difference between voluntary versus involuntary movement, but we'll just leave it at that and say don't worry about it for this competition. But good questions that you guys are getting into.
Another question, is actin and myosin, do they correspond to intermediate filaments, microfilaments, microtubules, or a combination thereof?
Uh, sorry, could you repeat it? I was looking for it in the chat and I didn't.
Okay, I think it came to me directly, but are actin and myosin, are they intermediate filaments, microfilaments, microtubules, or a combination, or none of the above?
I believe they're microfilaments, but correct me if I'm wrong, because I think they're like at the smallest level.
Actin's microfilaments, yeah.
Is there any more questions? I know this can be kind of confusing, all of the bands. But
Um,
this little chart back here is really helpful. It has everything all together and you can just go through and compare and contrast all of them.
So there was another question. So the actual length determined by myosin doesn't change, but everything is pulled by the actin?
Yeah, I believe so. Doesn't change.
Well,
Yeah, so
it's an interaction between actin and myosin.
yeah. Um, the myosin is pulling the actin. The A band length doesn't change, but overall, like the sarcomere when it contracts gets shorter. So it's kind of like, when you flex your muscle and it's contracting, like those fibers are pulling it together. So your sarcomeres are all just contracting and shortening like that. But it's just like the length doesn't change, but the myosin and actin are just interacting together. It's it's hard. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's like a multiple steps going on at once kind of process.
So I did look up the actin and myosin. Actin is a microfilament. Myosin is a motor protein. Okay. And it forms thick filaments. So Angel asked, what is the function of striation in the muscle? And I think that's what you're trying to explain, is that there is an interaction between actin and myosin, that when activated, it's going to shorten the length of the muscle, which is what we call contraction.
Okay. Uh, Go on to the next question. Hope that kind of helped, but I know it's kind of confusing, so I'd highly recommend looking up like a YouTube animation video, and just like it'll help you visualize what's going on and put things together. Did this one. Okay. From smallest to largest, how is skeletal muscle tissue organized?
And the poll in 3, 2, 1.
Nice. Looks like 90% got it right. The answer is B. So yeah, from smallest to largest, it's going to be those myofibrils, and then a bunch of myofibrils making up the fascicles, and then the fascicles make up the entire skeletal muscle. So here's a good picture of that. Here you've got the myofibrils, and then a bunch of myofibrils make up the muscle fiber, and then a bunch of those make up the fascicle. So the fascicles are kind of like the little bundles. And then a bunch of fascicles make up the entire skeletal muscle. Okay, and then here's my last question for you guys. What fibrous connective tissue layer surrounds individual muscle cells? Endoneurium, perimysium, epimysium, or endomysium?
And the poll in 3, 2, 1.
Great, yeah. The answer is D for this one. So A is incorrect because neurium, you got to pay attention to the whole word. So the endoneurium is going to be surrounding a single axon on a neuron, actually. And we're talking about muscle cells. So, it's one of the ones that ends in mysium, or yeah, mysium. The perimysium is around the fascicles, the epimysium is the entire muscle, and then the endomysium is on the inside on those smaller muscle cells. So you can think about it. We know that myo means muscle, mesium also means muscle. And then endo is like within, so that's always going to be like the innermost layer. And then the peri means around. So that's just like the middle one around the fascicles. And then epi is means like over, on, or above. So your epi is going to be like the outermost layer. And then here's that picture again, kind of showing them. The epimysium over here around the whole thing, the perimysium around each of the fascicles, and then the endomysium around the individual muscle cells.
Hopefully that does a
And
better
here's my
job.
references.
Oh, sorry. Hopefully that does a better job too, now that you guys have seen that again with the connective tissue layers within muscle, and then, can also expand that out to compartments. Hopefully that clears some of that up. But thank you so much, Taylor. That was awesome. We really appreciate you and your time and expertise in bringing this to us. What other questions do we have in the next several minutes here? We've got at least 10 minutes here that we can ask questions for histology if we still got some. I know we were able to answer some in real time here.
Or if no questions about muscle histology, maybe they're interested in her work as an EMT and work in the fire department during her gap years. I know in a previous session, there were a lot of questions about should you take gap years and is it a good thing or not? And maybe Taylor, can you say what your experience was with it and whether you felt it was worthwhile?
Sorry, you cut out there. I think my Wi-Fi cut out. What was that last bit?
With your work and taking gap years, did you feel that taking gap years was helpful? Was it worthwhile? I think a lot of people are like, let's get like boom, 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 boom. But is there benefit in taking gap years? And what was your experience?
Yeah, I definitely was really glad I took gap years after college. I definitely felt like there was pressure to like go, go, go and go straight through, but after college, I just needed a break from studying all the time, and I also needed time to study for the MCAT. It was just like a lot, and I was also working, and so for me, like taking a gap year was the best because I got to one like take the first break from school since I started in like kindergarten, and then it allowed me to get a lot of like clinical experience, which actually like really helps with your medical school application. So I got to go work on the ambulance and I got to work in the ER, and it like I was already interested in medicine, and that just like clarified that like that's what my passion was and what I wanted to do, and just like further motivated me. So I definitely would recommend gap years, because you can just like go live your life for a little bit and then school always be there.
And how do you find volunteer paid EMT opportunities? Adelaide says her school offers EMR, but I want to get more into it. So how would you suggest finding more opportunity?
Yeah, so I kind of had a foot in the door because I started scribing first at the hospital in the ER. And so I would just see, I got my EMT license, and then I would just see the paramedics and EMTs go by. And so one day I just asked them, like, hey, like, are you hiring? Like, what does that process look like? So I think getting like a foot in the door and doing some kind of volunteer exposure. And then I also did the like volunteer firefighting. So like I live in Montana, so like the whole state is really rural, so they're always looking for volunteers. So that's a really good like foot in the door too. If you just like call them and say like, hey, like I have my EMT, or like, can I just do a ride along? Then usually they're pretty good about that, and then it can kind of get you exposure, and you just kind of start showing up, and it helps out. And then like once you get a little experience, you might have to start with volunteering, and then when you go to apply for a paid job, you can say like, this is my background. And I think that helps too.
Sammy, you have your hand up. You can go ahead and unmute, ask your question.
Sorry, I had something in my eye. Goodness gracious. Okay. Hey, my favorite docs. It's about the histological. Oh my goodness. Hold on. Okay. Sorry, my contacts. Anywho. So, all right. Hey, my favorite docs. It's about the histology part of things. So I knew it was going to be oh my goodness. I knew it was going to be sorry. I was fighting through it over here. Okay. I knew it was going to be myosin for that last question. Yes. I was depicting between B and D. I knew that endo, like, you have your like kind of like for skin stuff like that. But I was thinking, I picked B because I was thinking of like your pericardium and stuff like that of like the heart. But I thought like that would surround it, but it was for yeah. So can you explain the difference? Oh, there we go. Never mind. All right. Okay, that's the big difference. Okay, never mind. Okay, I just wanted to see that difference there. So that's endomyosome is the individual. Okay, never mind. You just answered my question without any worries. Thank you. Never mind.
No worries.
You're
So
good, Taylor.
one thing that could be a good IDC is, what do the prefixes mean for this question? But one thing that might be helpful is, oh, there we go, including up and saying, okay, instead of individual muscle cells, if it said what fibrous connective tissue layer surrounds muscle fascicles, then the answer would be
Okay, paramyosome. Got it. I was
paramycium.
thinking
Yeah.
because I was trying to do my little mnemonic way. I always do, and I was like, okay, it has to be this one because it surrounds, that sac surrounds the heart. It was so wrong. Oh my goodness. It was right for something else though. So, okay, I got it now. I just wanted to know those big differences there.
That's part of the learning process, is integrating it with all the other stuff that we have in there. So you're doing all the right things by just being here. So I see one question is, what do the prefixes mean for this question? And I know Taylor, you'd gone through those. Do you mind just running through that again? Because I think that's a really important concept that doesn't just apply here.
Yeah, for sure. So the prefixes, endo, I think of like inside and like maybe like enter or just really, if you know that endo means like probably going to be the innermost on the smallest layer, that will help you because like this one's endonurium, endomysium. So you could probably guess that we also have these connective tissue layers on our neurons too. So if you get this endo down, then you're going to be set for that. So that's just again like endo is like innermost, or like I think technically it means within, but for me I just think like innermost. And then peri means around. So for some reason, I don't know why, when I think of peri, it's just like, oh, it's around the fascicle. So I think about a merry-go-round. I don't know why, it just works for me, but it's like the one in the middle. So that's like the between the individual muscle cells, but not quite around the whole entire thing. It's just right around the fascicles. That's your perimysium. And then the epi is going to be like, it means over, or it can mean on, or like above, I think is good. Above, or like the outermost. So I don't know if you guys have done anything with skin, but like your skin is like your epidermis. So that's like outermost is the epidermis, and then you have a bunch of layers in the dermis too. So the epi just means like above, outermost, however you want to do it. And then like you'll keep seeing these terms pop up over and over again. So knowing them really helps you clue in.
One last question here. Why does every muscle fiber need its own nerve ending instead of sharing signals like other tissues do?
I think having its own like a lets it like do its own specialized functions perhaps. So like for some they share them, but that's for one function. But then like if they also need to do something separate, then they need to have their own innervation. Because like maybe you just want to flex like one finger, you don't want to flex your whole hand. Like you need individual things to do like smaller functions.
So, and all typically that is true for muscle fibers, and that a nerve ending typically does go and cover multiple muscle fibers.
Okay, I think we ran out of questions. Taylor, you look relieved. So
You guys had good ones. I was on the
you,
hot seat.
I'm telling you what, they are on a roll tonight. It's really good. And Taylor, thank you so much.
Thank you, Taylor.
Yeah,
You
good
are
luck,
off the
everyone.
you are off the hot seat. So we have one more presenter this evening who will be presenting on the embryology of the musculoskeletal system, and that is Kacie McGowan. Uh, Kacie is from Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and graduated from the University of Notre Dame with a bachelor's in neuroscience and minors in anthropology and sustainability. And maybe she can enlighten us what sustainability means. She worked as a medical assistant in an orthopedic surgery clinic in her gap year. She is currently a second year medical student at Sidney Kimmel Medical College at Thomas Jefferson University. In her free time, she enjoys hiking, watching movies, and spending time with her family. So, Kacie, it's all yours. Bring us on home.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I don't know if some of you remember me. I also did the intro to anatomy about a month ago at the very first session of these. So it's super exciting to be back. Just before you get started, my sustainability minor was like a combination ecology and then also like sustainable development minor. So you learn like the ecology and also like ways that we can adapt the world to like changing climate, which was really cool. It was for fun, honestly.
Awesome.
But then to go ahead and get started, thank you everyone for sticking with me. I know it's been a lot of information, but the embryo of the system is pretty cool. And I'm excited to go over it. Everything load. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. So this is going to be the embryology of the musculoskeletal system. The questions and all the information are going to be based off of Austin's presentation from last year, with kind of one important difference that I will get to on the next slide. So these are going to be the lecture objectives. They are slightly different from what Austin presented because he actually covered all of the information you would need for the regional competitions, whereas what we're going over today are for the local competitions. Everything that I'm covering today, he also covered. He just had a little bit of extra information in there, which I do have one question on the end about that information, just, you know, to kind of cue in for what's upcoming next. But this presentation will more stick to what you need to know for the region or the local competition and these two specific lecture objectives. But if you do want to access that lecture that covered the material, it's linked at the bottom of this slide. So to start, I'm going to do kind of a warm-up question based off of, I believe it was Brian's presentation on gastrulation. Just because embryo, I think, really builds on itself, as you kind of like can imagine, as the embryo is going through these different stages of development, it's really important to know what happened first so you can understand what happens next. So I do at the beginning just kind of want to review the important information for this lecture that Brian covered in his last one. So for kind of our warm-up question, it's going to be what embryonic layer is formed by the first cells to migrate through the primitive streak? And you'll notice some of our prefixes are back again. Oh, whoops, I gave it away. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
We'll end the poll then.
Sensitive. Okay, great. Everyone knew it anyway. So right, this is going to be the endoderm. So when we're thinking about where we start with like a flat layer of cells, and at the caudal end, so like the tail end of that embryo, the primitive streak will start to form, which is a really important step because it gives our body like dimension. It decides what the top end or the cranial end is and what the caudal or tail end is. So the primitive streak will form, and then cells start to migrate through it. And this is where our first layer of cells that migrate through are going to form our endoderm. The next layer of cells is going to be our mesoderm, and then that top layer of cells is our ectoderm. And this is important too because it starts to give the body like a three-dimensional shape. And this is really the first time that we see this. And then from here on out, it kind of primes the body to go through the next big process, which is going to be organogenesis, or the formation of all the important major organs, which happens in this kind of week 3 to week 8 time period, which is super important and is kind of where we're going to start to see development of the musculoskeletal system and development of the limbs and things like that. So then here kind of is where we're going next from after we form that. This is all kind of like background information that'll be important to know for the MSK portion of this, but basically the embryo folds upon itself to form a tube. This is kind of hard to understand when you're just looking at flat images. So it's another point where I'd really recommend going to YouTube. Honestly, there's even some like GIFs that will cover it just to see how you go from these like 3 layers of cells into this shape that you see in the left bottom corner here, where you formed like a circular structure with your endoderm being this like central portion, then your mesoderm, and then your ectoderm. Because it is just kind of hard to understand from the flat images how you're getting the ectoderm like grows around the rest of it. But yeah, so then we have our ectoderm as our outermost layer, which is another point with the prefixes to learn, because ecto, I like to think of like exoskeleton, things like that, is usually this like outermost layer, which is kind of then reflected in what it ultimately forms, which is going to be our hair, our nails, our skin, and then the nervous system. Nervous system is a little bit more of a memory point, but you can always think like ectoderm's our outermost layer. It forms kind of these like external structures. The mesoderm, meso meaning middle, will form our middle layer, which is the red here. And then our endoderm, which again, we've we're just talking about how endo tends to mean innermost, will form this innermost layer here. So then just to kind of give a preview of what structures form what, I talked about the ectoderm. Our mesoderm, we're going to talk a lot more about in a minute here because it does form our skeletal and muscular systems. And then our endoderm layer will form the digestive system, the liver, the pancreas, and the lungs. So it does form like the endoderm kind of forms like most of your gut tube, and then kind of all of your mucous membranes is the best way kind of to remember it.
And I'll just point out really quick, just since we had that one up, there's a typo
Yeah.
about innermost, but you explained everything perfectly. And
Oh my gosh, yes.
so the audio that Kacie listened to what she said there, there's just a point here where it says innermost mesoderm. But everything that Kacie had said verbally was absolutely correct.
Yeah, so the innermost is the endoderm, sorry. Followed by mesoderm and the innermost endoderm. And just since we popped back on this slide, I think it's a good point to also point out that there is this universal embryology color system. So throughout most of the slides here, and probably in most images you'll see, they follow this color system where the endoderm will be yellow, the mesoderm will be red, and the ectoderm will be blue, which is just like a helpful visual tool. Thank you for catching that. Okay, so then kind of moving on to our next practice question here. Smooth muscle forms from what layer of the mesoderm? And I'm not going to touch my keyboard.
And in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, great. Spot on. So that's right. So our smooth muscle will form from our lateral plate mesoderm. I'll get to a few slides. It actually forms from even a more specific part of the lateral plate mesoderm that I'm going to cover in a minute here. But spot on. So for the mesoderm, we do have kind of 3 main types, and this image on the right here kind of shows it. The next image will show it even better, but basically the 3 main types. The intermediate forms between your paraxial, which is going to be here, which is then forms the somites, and your lateral plate, which is over here. So the intermediate is between the two. And this mostly forms organs of the genitourinary system. So this is going to be the last I mention it. It's a topic for later. Then you have your lateral plate, which is out here, and this is splits into your splanchnic and somatic mesoderm to form structures like smooth muscle. And then you have your paraxial, which is the central portion here that will form skeletal muscle of the trunk and the axial skeleton. And that image in the bottom left there shows you what I mean by the axial skeleton. It's kind of the midline structures of the skeleton that are usually, kind of midline here, not the limbs, the central trunk, vertebral column structures that are highlighted there. And then, kind of just some of the important structures highlighted on the right here that I'm going to talk about again in a minute. And also just to kind of show what this looks like in an actual cross-section of an embryo. So moving into our lateral plate mesoderm, this is another important place where kind of word roots, word definitions can be really helpful. So the word splanchnic, or this is also called the visceral mesoderm, both of those terms kind of mean related to the internal organs of the body. So when you think splanchnic or visceral, you'll think the viscera, the internal organs of the body. So this layer is what's giving rise to the smooth muscle of your GI tract, the cardiac muscle of the heart, the spleen, and then the serous membranes, which are going to be things like your pericardium, the membrane that surrounds the lungs as well. Those like serous membranes, not to be confused with mucous membranes, which are an endodermal structure that are like the inner surface of your mouth and nose. The words sound similar, but very different structures there. And the splanchnic or visceral mesoderm is actually going to be located closer to the endoderm in this innermost portion of the red mesoderm here, which I think is another good way to remember it because it's it's a deeper structure of the embryo, just like these visceral organs are a deeper structure of the body compared to what the somatic mesoderm forms. So then our somatic mesoderm here, which is going to be this more outer layer of red, will then form the bones and connective tissue of the appendicular skeleton, which is your limbs. That's another important point to remember. Whereas your paraxial, which has axial in the name, forms your axial skeleton, your somatic lateral plate mesoderm is going to form the bones and connective tissue of your limbs, which is a little bit of kind of just a memorization point there. So then thinking about the paraxial mesoderm, which is our other major portion of the musculoskeletal system, this is located more centrally right along the sides of the notochord and the neural tube, both of which are really important signaling structures. They give off tons of signaling molecules that are super important in differentiating the different segments of the body and these different structures. And the paraxial mesoderm will split into somites in a cranial and caudal distribution. And so what a somite is like a packaged, almost looks like a brick structure of tissue that will form very specific structures later on in the embryo based on where it is cranial to caudally. So the ones that are in like your up in the cranial cervical region will form like your cervical vertebrae, whereas the ones that are further down will form thoracic, lumbar, and they are very different. They're different from each other. And that helps give the body like the patterning that it has. And so ultimately our paraxial mesoderm will form all of these structures that are highlighted on the right side here. So these will be our tendons, muscle, the dermis of the skin, and the axial only skeleton, not the appendicular skeleton. Just like a note there, while it only does the axial skeleton, it does do like the dermis of the entire body. It does like all of your skin.
Kacie, Rashab had a question. What mesoderm forms appendicular skeletal muscle?
Appendicular skeletal muscle will also be the lateral plate mesoderm. So the like bones and the muscles go together. Sound good? Okay. Yeah, so then moving on to our next question. So those somites that I was just kind of describing, during what week of development do they typically form? And I say typically because another theme in embryo is that there is a little bit of variation and you'll see different numbers from time to time, but there is kind of like typical timelines that we expect things.
Ending the poll in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, great. So the answer to this is going to be B, but honestly, between B and C, both are pretty close. So it's going to be that actually typically we see the first somites forming around the end of week 3, maybe days like 20, 21, 22. But then they form one by one at like a very specific time in specific timing until you have the final number of them. So typically we would say like 4th week of development because they form one by one and that does take time. I would say also if you're interested in it, because these are pretty cool, there is cool videos where you can see that the somites form one after another, like down the body axis. So whereas somites are those like individual bricks that you can see on the left side of the image here, they are like wrapped in like an epithelial package. A somitomere is going to be the precursor structure to that. they are not formed into these like packaged bricks, but they are cells that will then be condensed and bound by the epithelium. I think it's important, just a note here, something you might encounter with embryo specifically is you'll see these migrating populations of cells referred to as mesenchyme. Mesenchyme primarily will be mesoderm, but those words are not interchangeable. And I just think that's an important thing to point out because you do see that word a lot, and it does relate to like loosely organized migratory populations of cells that are primarily mesoderm, but just those words are not interchangeable if you do encounter them. And sometimes somatomeres are identified as being like a mesenchyme population. But yeah, so the somatomeres will condense, they'll be bound by an epithelial package to form a somite. And then the position of somites on the cranial to caudal axis is important for body segmentation. Because like I said before, the signaling molecules that decide something will be, that help differentiate the somites. In the same way, the ones that are in the cervical population will form cervical vertebrae, which look very different from a lumbar vertebrae. And that segmentation is super important for proper like body functioning and development of the embryo past that point. So then continuing development from the somites, they will then form multiple structures from there. And this is another important kind of set of prefixes that can really help you identify what these are and what they will become. So the somite will then differentiate into the sclerotome, the dermatome, and the myotome. The sclerotome, sclera is more general, means hardening or hard, which then makes sense because this will form our bony structures, the ribs and the vertebrae. And it is kind of, you can see it's very closer, it's close to the midline here. And then your dermatome, which is kind of out here, which is more superficial, will form the dermis of the skin and the subcutaneous tissue. It's got that derm prefix. And then our myotome, which is a little bit deeper here, will form the skeletal muscle. I did say of the body, of the axial skeletal muscle. And so then to end off, my last question here is going to be the challenge question that was based off of the information on limb bud formation that will be covered in the regional competitions. But I think it's a good way to focus on things to come and kind of to see where this information goes in the future. But the limb buds form around week 6 from a thickened portion of what germ layer?
End poll in 3, 2, 1.
Okay. Honestly, a pretty good guess because this is a complicated topic. So it's going to be A. The limb buds start with the formation of something called your apical ectodermal ridge, which is a big complicated name, but it's basically a thick ectodermal structure that then sends signals to the tissues below it, a lot of which is mesoderm, to then induce the lengthening of the limbs. So basically, while it starts with this ectodermal structure, absolutely the mesoderm is involved in the lengthening of the limbs and the formation of the structures within the limbs. But a lot of times what you see is that first formation is this apical ectodermal ridge. But honestly, great job because that was a very challenging question. And that is going to be it. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer. I did see the one specification about the type of lateral plate mesoderm. That was the kind of note I was making. When you're thinking muscle or skeletal muscle or bones, like think the somatic, which is more of your like outer body structures. When you're thinking visceral or splanchnic, it's almost certainly going to be like internal organs, heart, like heart, lungs, like more of your visceral organs. Anything that's your somatic will be more of your like external limb structures, I guess. But any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
We have one. Can you explain the logic on why the ectoderm is the correct answer for the last question?
Yeah, so there's kind of there's a lot in embryology that's very, very complicated. There's a lot of communication between the different layers and signaling that goes back and forth between the different layers. So when I was, learning this, it's the ectodermal structure forms like a swelling that then sends signals to the tissue below it, which is that kind of that mesenchyme I was describing, to then induce the actual formation. So a lot of what becomes the limb is that tissue layer, but it's basically just a matter of which layer is initiating the signals for that like limb development to occur. It's very there's like a lot of like tiny little molecules, signaling molecules involved, and it definitely there's a lot of communication between the layers. But just for the limb bud formation, it starts with the ectoderm, and that sends signals downward. But I will also defer if there's a better answer.
No, I thought that was perfect and definitely appropriate for the level that we're at here. And just friendly reminder to everybody too that that last one was more so a regional objective. So you will not experience a question like that for as far as the local competition goes. But appreciate Kacie for going through that and giving you a taste of kind of how this is building up to something bigger.
Another question, how does the lateral plate mesoderm form the smooth muscle of the body?
I'm not sure of all of the steps of how it gets from one place to another. The mesoderm is one of the more loosely organized of the three layers, and it does end up forming a lot of different structures. But I'm not entirely sure how it goes from mesoderm to smooth muscle exactly.
The simplest and fastest way, I think, and just where I would leave it is that just like you had said, there's many different forms of signaling that are happening that are further differentiating the tissue with each stage that comes along. And so they will just differentiate into smooth muscle cells, once they get that signal and reach that point. I think I see another one here. For bud diagram, do the tissues extend beyond what is shown?
Which one is the bud diagram? Or which one did you mean by the bud diagram?
Was it the last slide that you were?
Like this one? Oh, do the tissues extend beyond what is shown? I want to say yes, if I'm understanding the question correctly, because what you can kind of think of it as is like, this is supposed to be kind of one somite. This is like where I think kind of videos can be helpful, because you have to think of this also as in like a 3-dimensional axis. So what you kind of see here is the X, Y, and not the like Z axis going down. So from, where is, too far. So if I understand what you mean by the tissues extending, like, yes, they will continue to grow and extend in all 3 axes. If that is what you mean. Okay, perfect. I'm glad that makes sense. Yeah, it can be hard because you're only looking at kind of a static image, and you have to remember that this is like a 3-dimensional embryo.
And also bilaterally. So this image is only showing you one side just for simplicity to make it easier to follow what's happening. But yeah. And then just to make sure this question makes it out of the chat and into the recording, there's a question: if skeletal muscles develop from somites arranged in neat rows, why does the final human body not look segmented like a worm or something similar? And I know Dr. Frank has an answer to that one too, if
yeah, I mean, It is because they continue to, I like this like kind of idea that they're like a ball of clay that keeps molding. Because they do form like these 3 different structures and then continue to proliferate from there. But at the same time, when you think about it, the vertebrae, which do develop from the somites, like are pretty segmented. So there is kind of a remnant of that. Like you do see that segmentation there. But at the same time, yes, they do continue to proliferate. And they don't maintain that brick structure like throughout development.
I think the summary too is that we do really just start off just like a worm. And that's why you'll notice that the embryology, if you look at different species, that it's really hard to tell what species you're looking at a certain age because the pattern is incredibly similar earlier on. And then just as these tissues continue to differentiate and move forward, you'll see that the signaling that they get develops very complex and very different structures from one to the next. So I think you bring up a good point, though, that there's a similar pattern in many embryos that show that we are basically kind of like just these worms to start. I don't know if you had anything else to add on to that, Dr. Frank. I know you made a comment about rotation with limbs. I didn't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a dermatome map, we talked about the levels of innervation of the skin. When we start, it's pretty even. It's 1-to-1, but once the limbs start to develop and elongate, they start to rotate, and the upper limb starts to rotate laterally. So that's why the palms face forward in anatomical position, but the lower limbs actually internally rotate or medially rotate, and that's why our toes actually point forward or anterior. So because of that, the dermatomes don't look like just straight lines. They look more like a barber pole where they're kind of rotating around, and it just makes it look much messier. But the reason for that is the development, and there are a lot of signals. Rashab is right that there are a lot of signals and cues that tell those cells how to divide and where to go and migrate as the limb develops from proximal to distal. And so and it also gives for a lot of variation. And when you're in anatomy labs, you'll note that there are a lot of variations in the extremities, uh, and which makes it fun for people like me who love variation and anomalies and things like that. So if you want those, look to the limbs. There's a lot of variation there. So it's a great question. So do somites just proliferate into the 3 tomes? That sounds like a band in the 70s or early 80s, the 3 tomes.
That really does.
Takes me back, sorry.
I mean, from my understanding, this is where it starts. They obviously then go on to form a diversity of structures from there. This is just kind of like the early divisions of them. My understanding was that this is the first 3 that form, or the first 3 main divisions. I don't know if there are other things that they develop into at this time, but this was my understanding was that it starts with the 3 tomes and then it goes from there to form all of those other structures that I touched on in that diagram earlier.
Yeah. Dr. Peterson's not with us, but she would probably go into a long explanation of multipotent versus pluripotent cells and how those things are influenced by, as Rashab said, signals and cues to change into different structures. So very, very complex subject. And that's why embryology is not for the weak of heart and will, right?
Absolutely. And I think Kacie has, from that presentation, I think has earned it into the Anato-Bee Embryology Hall of Fame because I think that was just such a great way to break everything down and keep it simple because just as we're finding in the Q&A that we very easily can see how complex it can be. So really appreciative of how you have broken that down. We still have 10 more minutes if anyone has more questions. I know embryology is intimidating. I think that that's the scariest out of all of them to jump into, but I really liked what Kacie said about how you can go find other videos that can be really helpful to use and coincide, watch those and come back here and try to re-answer the questions that we've asked. There are some really good ones with Play-Doh that can show you these different layers and how they're forming, but I do highly encourage you for embryology to fully embrace these layers and go from there. And as you've seen from last week and now into this week, it only builds on itself. And I mean, that's just how we develop. And so it really can benefit you to try to keep up with the embryology and not push that one aside because it's scary. So please keep asking all the questions that you guys are asking and attack it head on the way that you have been. I'm thoroughly impressed. You are way bolder and brighter than I ever was at your age. So it's just been really great to see. So I also just wanted to say I really have been loving in the chat how everybody is encouraging each other, helping answer questions, talking about different resources and things like that. So just keep doing all of the things that you guys are doing, and this will all make a little bit more sense. So any final questions, comments for the anatomy team, any of the presenters? I see a question that it's almost like a philosophical question is, I wonder if the heart starts beating before the brain is formed, does that mean the body learns to live before it learns to think?
That's actually quite insightful. Some would say it never does catch up for some people, right?
That's me.
Well, I think the one thing is that you have to have a way to, I mean, the brain is forming at the time that the heart is starting to develop, but when those tissues are forming, they need to have oxygen, they need nutrients. So how do we get that with blood? And so when we go through the cardiovascular system, we'll talk about that and how that all happens. And remember that all of this stuff is happening at the same time. None of these things that we're talking about are in isolation. And again, that's why this subject is so difficult, because it isn't like this happens and then this happens and then this happens. No, they're all happening at the same time, developing in their own time. Uh, but they're developing together in different areas, and they all interact. So the nervous system and the cardiovascular system are developing simultaneously.
Yeah.
So
I
it's a
think
great,
that's
great,
spot
great,
on.
great question. Great thought.
Yeah. And we'll talk more as the weeks go on about, kind of saying like, does the body learn to live? But you'll find that, when we get to a certain age, then living is, we can have more viable pregnancies past a certain point, and we'll spend more time with that in the future. But the body really, it does need the brain to live. It does need the lungs. It does. So it's not just the heart that, if it was just a heartbeat that kept all of us alive, then, we'd all be in maybe a little bit better medical shape if that was the only one that we'd have to worry about. So I think just it's cool how we can explore each of these topics and how each one is going to be essential for learning to live and things like that. So I see a question for Kacie in here is, how was the transition from pre-med to medical school?
Yeah, happy to answer, of course. I actually think it's been a really great experience. I did take a year off between college and med school, which I think gave me time to just want to be in school again, or want to be learning again. But I think at the same time, college or undergrad doing neuroscience was so deep into kind of one thing. And and I did learn to like really appreciate it. But when you go back to medical school, you're getting to learn about all the different organ systems and how they all work together, which is really cool. I also like, I always say like it's like going back to college, but majoring in what you wanted to like the first time. And you get to like, yeah, just kind of fully immerse yourself in like all the different stuff that medicine has to offer. So while it is really hard, if you're passionate about it, I don't think it's a um, too hard of a transition or too daunting. You just have to adjust to the different learning styles and the amount of material. But if it's like what you're passionate about, it's a great transition, and it's really exciting to be able to like learn all this stuff and get to do like clinical skills and be in the hospital. So I think it's a really exciting transition. And you're also surrounded by people all studying the same stuff, which is great because then you have like a full community of people around you who are basically kind of all taking the same classes and learning the same material. So there's a good support system there too.
Kacie, there are a couple of questions here. How is your major in neuroscience, and how long did it take you to figure out what you really wanted to do?
Yeah.
So,
Neuroscience is a great major. I actually picked neuro a little bit on a whim, a little bit because it was a little bit more focused on like human related issues than just doing like a general biology degree. So I thought it was really cool. I did a bit more of a biology focused one than a psychology. And I like that it has that flexibility because you kind of can pick your classes in it. And then it took me, I didn't decide I wanted to do med school until junior year of college, which is partially also why I did the gap year. I wanted to give basic science a try, joined a research lab, did bench research in neuroscience, and just didn't love it and realized I really wanted to be interacting with patients. But it took me until like end of sophomore, junior year of college to figure that out. But yeah, I think it's a good idea to kind of like try out both, see if there's other things in science that you're interested in, try out like something where you're interacting with patients, whether you're volunteering in a hospital or whatever, just like find the environment that works for you. Okay, wait, I'm gonna answer the second one before Luke's because it's more connected. But the latest you can decide to study, whenever, you can always go back. I think the latest, there were people who decided the same time as me, took the MCAT that summer, and then went straight through to medical school and didn't take a year off. So I think you can decide pretty late. And you can always take a gap year, you can always go back. But I would say like definitely kids who decided the same time as me, junior year of college, ended up going straight through to medical school without taking a gap year. So
to add to that, I interviewed a candidate for our program who is in his late 30s. So I don't think that there's any time limit, but I do think that there's a pressure we put on ourselves, especially at an early age, where we feel like we have to reach these certain milestones by a certain time. If you realize too late, that you started studying a little bit late, we have applicants that still make it into medical school that say their learning experience from taking the MCAT is that they're like, I didn't give myself long enough to study, and that's why they retook it 2 or 3 times and bumped their score up by 20 points. Those are all strong things that we see in a candidate that just show that they're committed and that they're learning. So those are the things that we're looking for. It's honestly, to me, almost a red flag if I see a student come in incredibly young, they took the MCAT one time, and they don't have a lot of real world experiences. Those things make me worry that the applicant is not going to adjust well to medical school in the same way that someone who took a gap year, who took the MCAT maybe a couple of times and is very committed to refining that basic knowledge ahead of medical school. All those things are only green flags to me.
And then in the last minute here, I'll answer why I chose Notre Dame. I went to tour it, like, which I think you have to do when you're picking a college. And what I really liked about it, one is that, I mean, it's a great academic school. It had a lot of options there. I'm a big football fan. I wanted to go to a school that had like a sports program. But more than anything, I just like the community was really great. I found that it wasn't really any kind of like cutthroat vibes. It wasn't super competitive. It was like a really supportive group of students that were like totally in love with being in school there. And I think like ultimately that was probably the main reason I decided to go there, was just that the community was so strong and it seemed like everyone was like really there to be supportive of each other. So I think those are all things to like think about when you're looking at schools.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, for the sake of everyone's time, and thank you so much for joining us again on another Sunday evening. So we are so grateful for each of you. The Anatomy wouldn't be what it is without you all as participants. So please just keep asking us questions and let us know how we can best serve you and just help you grow to be the best professionals in STEM that you want to be. And we're happy to help you see that through. So thank you for inspiring us to, always, keep making this program better and just celebrating this time with us. So I'll just thank our presenters again. Again, Kacie, you deserve to be in Embryology Hall of Fame. Same thing goes to Taylor for Histology and to Kenzie for our MSK earlier. So really appreciate you all. Thank you, Dr. Frank, for your moderation as always and getting those polls up in a timely and organized manner. Last thing I'll say is that World Anatomy Day is this Wednesday. I know we talked at the beginning of the session about the possibility of you all starting clubs. Even if you don't have a club, if you decide to do anything to celebrate World Anatomy Day, if you'd like to share it with us by tagging us on our social media pages or by emailing it to us, then we'd love to feature you and just show you what our anatomy participants are doing to celebrate the anatomical sciences. So if that speaks to you, then we'd love to broadcast what you're doing. So thank you everybody again, and we'll catch you next time in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.